Good morning, everybody. And yeah, congrats, TJ.
Thank you.
You're now global content, right, beyond sports. But,
That's right.
You're not going to leave sports entirely behind, I hope.
Sports is my first love.
Yeah,
So, I'm still around.
fantastic. And Elizabeth, as we talked about, President brands and properties. We were talking before, Amex, AT&T, Microsoft, also the biggest brands in sports. You've got a hand in how they're activating, and so we've got a ton to get into. My passion lies in this intersection between online and real world. And I think, as you may or may not have heard the last couple of years, the sports fan experience has changed a little bit. Had some opportunities to experiment, and we're going to get into a lot of that. But now as we go back 2022 to people coming back to events while trying to maintain that online environment for each of you, what are the challenges of balancing that? I mean, Twitter, we saw the Super Bowl. You guys had some massive physical activations while you're obviously an online company. What are the challenges of trying to balance those two things?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, first and foremost, it's so great to be like in real life with you people in South by Southwest. So yeah, clap it up.
Yay for real life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the challenge for us is to continue to have being okay with trying and it not working or working. For example, we had a Twitter house this past weekend, and we had Spaces booths. So Spaces is our live audio feature. And we were like, why not bring Spaces in real life and see how it works? And it actually ended up being a big hit. But the challenge for us is to continue to be okay with testing as we get a sense of what the right balance is. And it's going to take time. I don't think any one of us will have the answers, but I'm excited about the opportunity to innovate, to learn what works, and to learn what doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, look, I didn't go into engineering. I went into marketing, which means test and learn is a good thing. But yeah, no, it's I don't look at any of it as challenges. I look at all of it as opportunity. Which I know sounds terribly cliche. I'm sorry about that. But it was, look, I say during the pandemic, necessity is one hell of a mother of invention, man. You do what you have to do to get by. And, sports is such an interesting world to be in because in times of crisis, culturally, it's usually what we turn to. We turn to the things that unite us as communities. And after 9/11 and 08/09 and the financial crisis, there are moments in time, historical moments in time, where we all suffered as a community, and we turned to our sports. I can remember the first football game back after 9/11. It was this empowering moment, and we didn't have that this time, and that was a great big giant surprise for all of us. There was no blueprint on how to deal with that in this industry. And so we pivoted, like I said, necessity, one hell of a mother of invention. We pivoted to what we need to do. We evolved into this online and this virtual world. Now, make no mistake, and I'm sure you would agree, sports needs live.
That's right.
We needed to be together. No disrespect to the first responders, but and the people who dealt with the pandemic. But what I learned is that what we do in bringing sports to people is an essential service. People need that to feel connected and to feel joy and to feel community. So those who were saying, well, nobody will ever go back in a stadium again, no one will ever care about watching a live basketball game, I completely ignored. I knew that would not be the case. But the trick and the opportunity is to take the good things that came out of the pandemic and how we learned to communicate our content in that challenging environment while we get back to live and blend the two. I don't think they'll all go away.
There were, on ESPN, there were driveway horse games on television.
Yeah.
Like that.
I'm sorry, when I saw Flip Cup on TV, I was like, I could have made a lot of money out of that in college, man. I was a good Flip Cupper in college.
That's right. So there certainly was no shortage of trying. I remember picking up the phone or the remote and seeing guys in their backyard. And it was sponsored by State Farm. And in my mind, I'm like, all right, we really need sports.
We were getting into ESPN Ocho level.
Yeah. And so for Twitter now, are you trying to recreate that live in-person experience online with Spaces, or are you trying to foster real in-person events via connections on Twitter? What's the priority there?
Yeah, I think the answer for us has actually always been both. So immediately when March Madness was canceled and the Rudy Gobert incident happened, where he was touching the microphones and it got crazy, The NBA called us, the NFL called us, ESPN called us, and they said, all right, we've got millions of followers on your platform. We don't have live sports.
Yep.
What do
Now
we do?
what?
Yeah.
Right? So it turned into this amazing opportunity to brainstorm with them, to roll up our sleeves and think of ideas that may work, that may not work. But it was cool, and I told my team, I was like, guys, they need us. Like, this is what real partnership looks like. We're building ideas together to help people, sports fans specifically, get through this really, really difficult time. So we've been able to develop a few tricks that we know make sense for us IRL, as well as sense for us on the timeline. We often liken ourselves to the roar of the crowd, right? Like, whether there's a game in person or not, you can quite literally see that roar of the crowd on the Twitter timeline. So we've got a few new tricks up our sleeves, and we've been able to learn a lot as a result of this.
Yeah, and how much of that invention, that you were forced to do on the brand side is sticking around? Are people looking to continue to invest in, the online version of going to an event?
Well, look, there are definitely reasons why big brands like AT&T and American Express and others that we're fortunate enough to serve, there are reasons why they invest in sports and entertainment. It's because that power and that passion is something they want to be close to. And so the live components of that matter. However, one of the things, like I'll give you a prime example. One of the things we did during pandemic in 2021 when Wimbledon allowed some fans back, but not full, American Express is a big sponsor of Wimbledon and was very concerned about not having the full crowd on site to be able to activate with. And so we created tennis, we like to call it tennis's first metaverse. We recreated Hinman Hill and allowed you to put, which is the famous hill in Wimbledon where you can watch the matches. And we allowed you to build your avatar, meet up with your friends, and experience that from your phone or computer. What was lovely about it is, and this is the element that I think we'll take forward, yes, we're going to go back full time. Yes, there will be a complete crowd this year. But what was lovely about that is there were participants from 130 countries. 130 countries worth of people cannot come to Wimbledon. There's not physically enough space. People can't travel. There are challenges. And so to be able to take the learning from that, fully embrace live when it comes back, but still have that component that allows people from 130 countries around the world to experience something so magical, that blend is what people are going to try to hold on to.
What I love about that too is it's an example of a traditional rights holder saying, you know what, we typically wouldn't allow you to do this, but let's give it a try.
Let's give it a try, yeah.
With the NFL, we had an example. I love our friends at the NFL, by the way, but historically, they've been a bit more protective over their IP, as they should. So they reached out to us and said, hey, we want to make sure that fans can be involved in the game experience. So we created this thing called Showtime Cam. We actually put a camera, an apparatus in the end zone, and fans, people at home on their couches, were on that display board. Players would score a touchdown, they would dance, they would turn up in front of fans. So now you've got players celebrating with their fans at home in broadcast, which is something that the NFL would never allow prior to the pandemic. So what I loved was the fact that we pushed each other to think about ideas that had never been executed before.
And that's a great example. So whether it's that specifically or in general, is that something you think will stay around, or is the NFL still going to be thinking about fans who can't come to the games even when there are full stadiums?
Yeah, I think that there will just be more of a balance. It will also be a function of whether brands are willing to pay as much as they were during the pandemic, because a lot of these experiences were powered by the fact that brands were fulfilled in arena, in stadium, on site. When you remove that dynamic, how the hell are you going to fulfill your brand who spend millions of dollars to travel alongside your property each and every day? So I think that has changed a bit, but we'll figure it out.
I spent way more time than I ever thought I would reading force majeure clauses in the last 2 years. Like, is pandemic in there anywhere? And in fact, we did during the pandemic, we renegotiated over 1,000 contracts globally between brands and properties. And of the over 1,000, just over 1,000, there were two.
Just over 1,000.
It was like 1,010 or 12 or something like that. There were two contracts that we dealt with that actually had a call out in force majeure for pandemic. out of over 1,000. Not every damn one of them has it now, but 2. So we were truly flying blind with how to handle this. The one thing that I'll give a shout out to all of my brand clients to, every last one of them, even the ones that were the hardest hit in the travel industry, hotel and airline partners, every single one of my clients, nobody said, okay, I want out.
Wow.
They said, I need to figure out what to do. I need to figure out how to activate. I need to figure out how to make goods. I need to figure out how our property is going to extend our deal, or any of the elements that went into those negotiations. But nobody said they wanted out. And I think that's because everyone realized the power of sport and what would come back first and strongest and the most uniting sport. And everyone realized that and wanted to stick with it.
Do you think we're going to still have that level of access to the players, to the games that was kind of unlocked because of the pandemic, whether it's microphones, whether it was these on-field cameras that you were interacting with? Is that something you think sticks around?
The players loved it.
Yeah.
Like, you got to think about it. I mean, I don't represent, at Wasserman, I represent everything but the player side. So we have a whole division that represents athletes, a bunch of Jerry Maguires running around. But in working with my colleagues over there, there's nothing worse than an athlete who's used to being on the court every day, training, stuck in his house for 2 years. And they were bored. And so the interesting thing is we got some of our athletes to do things that, historically speaking, they wouldn't have necessarily considered. Certain engagements, certain video conferences. They learned how to Zoom. That was fun. But they liked it. The universal feedback we got was that connection they felt with their sponsors and their fans was powerful. So I think it's obviously difficult to balance a full training season with that. They had the luxury of time to be able to do that. But I do think that they'll lean in a little more, and they'll want to do a little more accordingly.
How are you seeing athletes use Twitter differently than maybe they did?
Yeah, I think athletes are just way more engaged. I mean, more specifically, I think about the incredible women in the WNBA. They quite literally changed the world during the pandemic by way of using social media. Women's March Madness tweeted out images of shitty sandwiches, and
sure enough, a completely non-existent gym. That was
sure enough,
Sedona, right?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It turned into real change. So, box score aside, wins and losses aside, what I'm super excited about is athletes are saying, I have a platform and I can actually drive change by doing this. I don't give a damn if we won the game or not. I can go to Twitter and actually start a conversation and actually change things. That's what I'm most excited about. There's this groundswell of interest around women's sports too. And I think a lot of that has started by way of the sports community galvanizing around women's sports on social media, specifically Twitter. So that's a trend that I'm pumped about and I hope to see continue.
Yeah, and we've seen, Alexis was talking about it yesterday, but the following that a lot of these women have on social media, on Twitter, how do you see them turning that into dollars, whether it's with deals on the platform or whether it's using that voice to create change elsewhere?
I'm really interested to get your take on this. For years, so we've worked with the WNBA for like 5 years, and I remember going in brand pitch after brand pitch after brand. So we have this sponsorship thing called Amplified, super turnkey. It allows brands to travel alongside property content. So I'd go into these brand meetings and I'd have these beautiful slides and I would say, you need to invest in women's sports. Furthermore, these properties are so inclined to allow you to innovate in ways that traditional rights holders just won't let you do. And they'd say, yeah, it's a great idea. And then they would ghost me on emails. And the only time I'm okay with ghosting is when I'm dating. That's it. But not in brand pitches. So year after year after year, we would hear no, we'd hear no, we'd hear no. And over the past few years, we started to see that change. We started to see brands say, hey, tell us more about this W opportunity. Tell us more about this NWSL opportunity. So I believe that brands truly have a responsibility to help elevate and amplify all things women's sports. The following might not be as scaled as that of a LeBron James or Tom Brady, but the engagement is
very much
hyper-engaged fans.
Very much so. Look, we, about 3 years ago, Wasserman launched something called The Collective. And The Collective is a division that's about creating opportunity for and visibility of an opportunity for women in sport. Athletes, executives working in sports. I'm a big believer if you want to change what gets through the gate, you change the gatekeeper. If we want more women's sports on TV, we need more women making the editorial decisions to put it on TV. But even, when we did it, we sat around and looked, and at the time, we had 50-50 gender equity in our company, which is unheard of in sports. So we were 50-50 in my group. We had, of our top 12 or 15 brand clients, I think at the time, like 9 or 10 of them were helmed by female CEOs or CMOs.
Wow.
And then we represented more female athletes than any other agency in the world. And so we had this moment of an epiphany that said, well, if not us, then who, right? And we got to do it now. So we started the collective to do that, to exactly your point, TJ. And what was interesting that we found is these women have had to hustle their entire careers. Like, I was actually with one of our athletes, Sue Bird, not too long ago, and she's like, look, for me to be successful, I got to go work it. For a male athlete to be successful, he just got to show up. And I thought that was a really powerful thing. So they're used to having to use their voices. They want to use their voices, but you have platforms like Twitter who just put a megaphone in front of that voice. And you're absolutely right. What they lack in scale, and some of them don't even lack in scale. Go follow Alex Morgan or Megan Rapinoe or some of the amazing women that we represent. Their engagement is off the charts compared to some of their male athletes and counterparts. What's also really interesting is if you look at the female consumer, most specifically Gen Z, we spend a ton of time studying this woman coming up as a consumer, as a fan, as a new entrant into the workplace. Powerful spending power, decision making, the sense of moral compass, what they expect of the brands that they work with or the brands that they shop with. They expect you to engage in women's sports. They expect you to support them, because if you don't, they'll take their dollars away. And they control, 85-90% of the dollars that are getting spent out there right now. So it's a fascinating platform that a lot of brands need to be paying more attention to.
Wasserman is a very analytical company when it comes to sponsorships. Twitter obviously has more data than anything on the way fans interact with sports. What are some of the numbers that you cite most often when you're pushing these points or trying to convince people of the opportunity and the the need to get involved here?
Oh, he's going to make me quote numbers, and I'm going to get them wrong.
Are you taking the bait? Are you doing this?
Yeah, no, I'm going to completely divert from
How
that.
about that?
Yeah. No, because the minute I get a number wrong, somebody very, very smart in my R&I department will call and yell at me, and her name is Shelly. In case y'all are wondering, Shelly Pissarro, smartest analytic person in the world. She will yell at me if I get a number wrong. No, what I will say in terms of numbers, the one I'll call your attention to is 4. There's 4 and 1. 4% of the coverage on television is for women's sports. Only 4. Only 4. And if you look at the sponsorship dollars that are spent, only 1% of the sponsorship dollars overall in this world go to women's sports. Now, that's changing thanks to platforms like Twitter and what you guys are doing to elevate it, and the brands who are investing. But those are the numbers we pay attention to. There's a big initiative to get the great work that's been out there. Many of you guys may have heard of a platform called See Her. And if you see her, you can be her. It's a media platform. We're working on See Her in sports, that getting brands to be aware of gender equity and when they're making their spending decisions. Now, and to understand the power and the impact of those spending decisions. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but I'm a big believer that you can do good and do good business at the same time. And in investing in women's sports is an example where you can do both. Predominantly because of the number that I cited earlier, somewhere in the 85 to 90% range is the percentage of the purchasing decisions that will be controlled by the Gen Z woman. The Gen Z woman that's coming up as a consumer right now has more purchasing power than any cohort generation that came before her. Pay attention to that, because she will absolutely hold you accountable if you don't spend in the ways that she thinks is appropriate for her as a consumer.
Yeah, the number that I routinely discuss in meetings is 3 billion. Last year there were 3 billion tweets about sports, which is a clear sign that people like to tweet about sports. We are the home of real-time sports conversation. So if you're looking for that leaned-in fan, if you're looking for an audience who is paying attention to sports, who's driving trends, who's shaping culture, they're on Twitter. So as a sports property or a brand, you have a ripe opportunity to tap in with this incredible group of people who not only leverage their platform to speak about what they support, what they don't support, but they're trendsetters. They shape culture.
Yeah.
Well, and that's consistent too. Like this is where I'm about to date myself, how old I am. But I remember way back in the day of the Foursquare check-in. Like I remember the first report that ever came out about the top 20 places checked in the world. And of the top 20, 18 of them were sports related. It was
That's
like a
nuts.
Madison Square Garden or, Wimbledon or something related to sports. The only two that weren't were the Vatican. Okay, we'll shout out the Pope. And no one to this day has been able to explain to me why a TGI Fridays in Norway. True story. Go look it up. That was like 20 some years ago.
Maybe it's outside of a soccer stadium. Who knows? Yeah.
No clue. I researched the hell out of that. I could never figure it out. But 18 of the top 20 places in the world were sports related.
We mentioned off the top, you're now global content. You go beyond sports, and I'm curious, what are sports competing with for attention right now, and what are sports learning from? Like, what other categories are doing interesting things that you hear sports clients come to you and say, we want to do something like they're doing?
I would say that there's just so much fragmentation. Like, share of mind is really, really difficult, particularly for Gen Z. There's a ton of fragmentation, but they operate within this distraction. They're on TikTok, they're on Twitter, they're on Instagram, they're on every platform, and they spend a ton of time there. So for us, specifically as I think about Twitter Sports, there is a need to continue to be breakthrough. There's a need for us to continue to do culturally relevant work because share of mind is so difficult to unlock. So existing within this hyper fragmented space of sports content and just content living everywhere. There's no shortage of it, so it really requires you as a brand, as a property, as a platform to create things that are sticky, to do things that break through, which is why we're so bullish about putting tweets on roofs and confetti and doing things that
The
I like to
confetti
say.
was cool.
Thank you.
I like
should
that
get
very
you a piece
much.
of confetti. I got a few.
You do?
I'll make it happen.
Oh, sorry. Brokering a little deal up here.
But yeah, I think it's a really interesting time as a sports fan or a media fan in general. There's so many different touch points.
Yeah. I would agree. I mean, if you think about it as a consumer, you never sit down and say, this is my hour for watching sports.
That's right.
This
That's
is
right.
my hour for shopping online. This is my hour for talking to my friends. It's all like this. And I remember seeing it, I'm such a nerd, the first Twitter NFL game.
Yeah.
Like, so I remember we were all like sitting in the room. We had it on TV. I had my phone. I had two different phones. I had an iPhone. I had a Samsung. I had my iPad. I had like every different thing, and I was trying to see how it worked on all the different platforms. And that's the one thing that I noticed in that moment is that it was all of those things converging. You were watching a football game, sharing your opinions with your friends, meeting new people, shopping, because literally somebody would say, oh my God, I like that jersey, where can I pick it? Somebody'd send a Fanatics link. Like, it was all of that in one experience. And that's when you realize that convergence of sort of attention capital. Like, it'd be different if there was, between 9 and 11 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. This is when you reach sports fans. It's not like that. It's 24/7, and it's all merged in with everything else that they're doing at one time, especially with that sort of, I can't even say bifurcated, trifurcated, however many fricated you can do, of attention with the consumer. Like, my son's 16. Like, boy can't figure out how to do his math homework, but can watch 17 platforms at one time.
That's nuts.
And that's what you're competing against, that share of attention.
It's one of the reasons why we're so bullish on live audio.
Yeah.
Because you can have a conversation or be listening to a conversation passively or intentionally while you're swiping through different apps, emails, watching stuff, the entire gamut of options. So social audio has been really interesting for us because you can be leaned in or you can be passive and still kind of take information in. Yeah.
And what have you found when you're talking about Spaces live audio? What have been the most impactful sports use cases for that? Is it what is it? Is it events? Is it conversations? What's going on there?
Yeah, this will come as no surprise to anybody in this room, but it's provided confirmation that sports fans are absolutely fucking nuts.
Yes.
Sports fans are nuts, and they are super passionate. So immediately after a game, particularly two particular properties, English Premier League soccer and college football.
Okay.
Immediately after games or immediately after a coach getting fired or a coach getting hired, they take to Spaces and they just talk. It is
Or before they fire the coach,
Or
when they
before
think
they-
they're supposed to.
That's
There's a whole lot of that
exactly
going on too.
it is the message board in real life. And you've got SEC fans screaming about a recruit that they lost. You've got folks talking about whether Ronaldo has lost his magic or not. But it's a hyper engaged community experience. And there's something really humanizing about hearing your voice too. We've always been a connection platform, but social audio is taking it a step further. One of the opportunities that exists for us, and we should probably talk about this, are sponsorship fulfillment opportunities.
That was my next
within-
question.
within-
When you
within
hear
the-
all this
We're gonna
passion,
do another deal.
yeah.
That'd be great.
When you hear all this passion, how does the brand fit in? How does it foster
It's
that
the reason why.
connection?
So I am this may surprise some people in this room. I am not a sports fan. I run one of the biggest sports agencies in the world. I'm not a sports fan.
It comes out, 25 minutes in, the truth comes out.
Truth comes out, and I didn't even have wine. Personally, I mean, I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Sort of basketball's in your blood, so I certainly enjoy it. I definitely enjoyed the other day, but it's not like I'm not one of those rabid. You get up the next day. Some people will ask me like, "Oh my God, did you see the game last night?" And I have to actually remember what was on TV. But I'm a brand marketer. Pure brand marketer is my background, and I got into